This special seminar with two extraordinary individuals who I count as friends of mine and for whom I have a lot of admiration. Joshua Wong Chi-fung in Cantonese, and Nathan Kwun-chung in Cantonese, who are leaders of the student movement, the pro-democracy movement, of the pro-democracy umbrella movement that emerged in September to December 2014 and that captured the hearts and imaginations of Democrats around the world. Obviously, a lot of Democrats are people interested in the fate of Hong Kong on this campus because Joshua and Nathan, you should know, this is as large a turnout as we've ever gotten in this room. You see people spilling into the halls there. And so you have a substantial and I think sympathetic following here and elsewhere, as I think you know, in the United States. So first, Joshua began to protest and to organize as a high school student and student activist in Hong Kong. He formed something called Scholarism and then played a leadership role in mobilizing high school students, as I said, during the umbrella movement. He's only 19 years old, but he and Nathan both have the maturity, wisdom, and mobilizing capacity of, frankly, seasoned politicians of timeless ages. They're quite extraordinary individuals. He's now a student at Hong Kong Baptist University, so
Open University.
Open University.
Open University. So I hope you are not missing any classes being here today, Professor. Otherwise, make sure that somebody's taking notes for you.
Yeah, he's asked his group mates to do his homework for him according to some Facebook statuses.
I know that isn't true. Joshua first attained popular fame, I think you may know, in the highly successful anti-brainwashing campaign of mid-2012, which opposed the government's introduction, that is the introduction by the government, of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of a mandatory national education course in all local schools to promote pro-PRC, pro-Chinese Communist Party patriotism. And he was named one of Time Magazine's most influential teens in 2014 and was nominated for Time's 2014 Person of the Year. I think you were about 17 then at the time, so that is one of your speakers today. The other, Nathan Law, is one of the leaders as well of the Hong Kong student movement. He is Secretary General of the Hong Kong Federation of Students. He's been a standing committee member of that organization before that. He participated in the only negotiation session with the Hong Kong government during the umbrella movement. These two people, I think, are very much part not only of the present of the struggle for democracy and civil liberties in Hong Kong against increasingly difficult odds by a stubborn and repressive regime that we know not only sits in Hong Kong, but is based, unfortunately, in Beijing. And they are very much part of what I am confident will be a truly democratic future in Hong Kong. So with that, Nathan and then Joshua, we look forward to your presentation.
Hello everyone, I didn't expect so much crowd for it. And I'm Nathan Law, and I was the Secretary General and Standing Committee member of HAFS. And now I'm the chairperson of a newly formed organization called Democracy in Hong Kong. So that this is my brief introduction. And today I'm going to talk about a story, although it is kind of like an academic forum, but actually I want to tell you guys more about a story about Hong Kong and its role for democracy. And first, why we are talking about the role for democracy in Hong Kong? Because in Hong Kong we have never tasted the true democracy. The story starts in the year of 1997. and in the event of handover. Before the handover, Hong Kong is actually the British colony, and you know there's some kind of regulation that in the 70s, if Hong Kong is still remained in the list of the colonies in the United Nations, then it has its right to have self-determination and to decide its sovereignty status later on. But in the 70s, as the British government and the Chinese government started to really talk about the future status of Hong Kong, actually, Chinese government they put pressure on United Nations, and after that, United Nations has cancelled the status of colony and kicked Hong Kong out from the list of the colony, so that the discussion of the Hong Kong's future and Hong Kong's status after 1997 is in Chinese hand. And during the 1980s, there was a massive debate and negotiation about Hong Kong's future after 1997, because at that point of moment, the treaty that signed between the British government and Chinese government will be ended, and they have to start to discuss about the sovereignty status after 1997 of Hong Kong in the 80s. So that was a very, very famous saying that the negotiation of Hong Kong's sovereignty status is not a three-legged stool, which means that in the table there's only two chairs, and there are only British government and Chinese government sitting on the table, but without the participation of Hong Kong and Hong Kong people. So we're in a context that in the 1980s we didn't have any power to be involved in the negotiation about Hong Kong's sovereignty status after 1997. And there was a international treaty signed by the British government and the Chinese government after the negotiation about Hong Kong's status. It is called the Sino-British Joint Declaration, and it was signed in 1984. And during this discussion, once again, there's no room for Hong Kong people. In the Sino-British Joint Declaration, it clearly stated that Hong Kong should have its rights, or there should be democracy in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong people should have its right to elect its own chief executive and elect its electoral members. But unfortunately, we could still see that from now, it is not being executed by the Chinese and Hong Kong governments. And actually, this international treaty was endorsed by a lot of international community, including the USA. So in 1997, Hong Kong was officially handed over from the from the British government to the Chinese government. And after that, the situation of lack of democracy is still in a situation that there's not much improvement. In the basic law of Hong Kong, which is the Constitution of Hong Kong, it clearly states that from 2007 we should have an open and fair election on the chief executive. But for the election now, although we are in 2016 now, the election still remains very close one, and there's only 1,200 election committee electing the chief executive, and those members in the election committees, they have a very small voting base, and to be more all in all, we could say that the election is basically controlled by the Communist Party, and Communist Party could basically pick their candidates and to decide who will win because of the election structure. And after 1987, there's actually worries about the fading of Hong Kong's human rights and and freedom, and that's actually that's actually what's happened, what has happened for the past about 20 years. After 1997, there's a trend of Hong Kong of the Chinese government getting their hands in Hong Kong's affairs, and it is not what the basic law have promised, which is we have high autonomy, and other than military and diplomatic issues, we have our own right. We won't receive any interference from the Chinese government, and the truth is that from 1997, the hands of Chinese government started to putting it into Hong Kong society, and that was a very famous incident, and people claim that that might be the start of Hong Kong civic society in 2003, and it was a turning point for Hong Kong. In 2003, the Hong Kong government and also basically the Chinese government wanted to push a law which is called Article 23, and it allows the government to basically charge anyone who has said anything against the government, against the Chinese government, and charge them by only saying something or doing something that might be very sensitive to the Chinese government. So that triggered a massive protest, and it successfully forced some electoral members to switch their stance in order to veto the bill. And after that, the bill was vetoed, and someone said that that was the start of Hong Kong civic society and the start of Hong Kong's resistance towards the interference of Chinese government. And not only on the political side, but also in the society, Hong Kong's situation is getting worsening after 1997. And in Hong Kong now, Hong Kong is basically it has the huge largest wealth gap among the advanced cities in the world, and its poverty problems is very serious, and the government hasn't been handled it well for the past 20 years. And also the housing problem, as you could see that I intentionally put this image that little because people can only have very limited space in Hong Kong, and that's actually how much space that Hong Kong people can enjoy in this picture. And Hong Kong's housing problem is very serious because there's statistics showing that in Hong Kong, basically Hong Kong's property price is the most unbearable one, and it is even worse than in New York, in downtown New York. So that a lot of teenagers or youngsters like me, we won't dare to have a plan to buy a property because it is quite impossible for us to do that. And as I was mentioned, we have worries about the fading of freedom in Hong Kong because before 1997, we always say that Hong Kong is a place that, although there's no democracy, but there's certain extent of freedom that we could enjoy. But after 1997, after handover, we are afraid that if we have no democracy, and also the freedoms that we enjoyed before keep fading now. So that you could see that there's an obvious fading of freedom in Hong Kong, wherever the freedom of speech, freedom of demonstration, and freedom of press, and those are very important to Hong Kong people, especially for the press freedom. And I think the press control in Hong Kong is not a very unique case. Actually, the Chinese government is doing this all around the world, including in Singapore, including in Taiwan. Is that by the inflow of red money, they bought a lot of press companies, and by controlling their high officials, they could control the reporting direction of their fellows, and then try to have a dominant press control. And this situation applies in Hong Kong. A lot of Hong Kong press are being bought by the Chinese government, and the press control in Hong Kong is actually quite serious. And a lot of newspaper has turned their stance and became very pro-Beijing, and only very limited or very few press like Apple Daily they could have a stance that could somehow against the brutality of the Communist Party. So after all, now we have to put our eyes on the movement, the umbrella movement that's happened in 2014. And the triggering moment of that movement started from the issue of the white paper. And this white paper was issued by the NPCSC, which is the deciding institution of the Communist Party, decision-making institution. And it clearly stated that Hong Kong there's no true democracy in Hong Kong, and basically it determines that the election committee of the chief executive, as I was previously explained it, will remain for long, and Hong Kong people have no say about picking up the candidates. And so that in 2014, the people were actually very angry about this decision, because true democracy is granted by the basic law, and this white paper has destroyed that promise. So that there was a massive anger and massive disappointment in Hong Kong society. And after that, the two election system, both the chief executive and the legislative council one, we don't have a massive reform, as we cannot foresee a massive reform, as there was the issue of the white paper. So that we started to think about how we could fight back and how we could create enough pressure to the government. And it's time to talk about the umbrella movement or umbrella revolution quoted by some foreign media. And actually the Chinese government was saying that this is a separatism movement, but actually it is a movement that we want all the promise to be executed by the Chinese government, and it's a movement that safeguards the high autonomy of Hong Kong. And it started with the student strike, as students are the very active and progressive unit of the society. And after the issue of white paper, there was a massive discussion about what to do among the student peers, and we have came out an idea about class boycott. And this class boycott was organized by HAFS and Scholarism, and we mainly focus on the college students, and Scholarism, they focus on the high school students. And for the class boycott, there were 5 days in a row, and the first day was in the CUHK, and 13,000 of students attended to that class boycott to express their anger towards the white paper and express their hope for democracy. And after the class strike 5 days in a row, that we gained those response from the government, so that we tried to escalate the movement. We broke into the Civic Square, which is a famous place for people to gather and express their feel, but it was being closed by the government just a few months before the issue of white paper. And then after the Civic Square incident, the government was very angry about the behavior of the students and also the other citizens, so that they released 87 cans of tear gas in response to our actions in the downtown of Hong Kong. And it was basically triggered the umbrella movement. And those are the brutalities that you could see in the movement, that a lot of people are being beaten to bleed, and some may even, still for now there's no independent investigation about the police brutality in the umbrella movement, and basically no one get any compensation or any just investigation among their incidents. And there's like a lot of evidence showing that people the police who are very active in those brutality incidents, they got promoted in their system, so that you can see that the brutality from the police is being protected by the whole government, or even encouraged by some rewards like promotion. And there was a dialogue to the government during the movement, and that was the only one debate that we had, and of course that gained no result from the dialogue. And then after that is the clearance. And the reason why I briefly just talk about the movement very briefly, because we wanted to focus on what has happened after the movement, because it's been a year and a half, and in Hong Kong there's massive changes in terms of its political scene, and in terms of how people view the Hong Kong as a city. So that is the part of the umbrella movement, and I believe that there are plenty of resources that you could look for in the internet to know more about the whole event. And after the umbrella movement, although we cannot force any concessions from the government, and the election system now is still remained fairly closed and undemocratic one, but we actually achieved something which we have generated enough pressure for the Pan-Democrats, which is the pro-democracy camp in Hong Kong, in the Legislative Council to veto the political reform based on the white paper, so that we restore our integrity and we are not humiliated by the NPCSC. And I think the battle is long, and it is just a part of the story about Hong Kong's role for democracy.
Yeah, after Nathan have a brief explanation or elaboration on the situation of Hong Kong before hand over until the end of umbrella movement and how the legislator have vetoed the political reform package, I would like to share about the situation of Hong Kong after since 2015. After the umbrella movement end, actually what we face is the loss of faith. What I mean is, more and more people have realized that under the rule of Beijing government, actually they have just broke the promise in the joint declaration. One country, two system, joint declaration, rule of law, and also a lot of freedom and human rights. Things seems to be moving backward instead of moving forward under the rule of President Xi and also the chief executive of CY Leung. We have realized and also faced the fragmentation and the split of the civil society. A lot of the young people in Hong Kong would just hope to follow the trend of radicalization to strengthen or to show the disagreement and to through the strike to let Beijing government to know that actually we are the dissatisfaction of the Hong Kongers. And actually it is also showed with the politics with negative sentiment. For example, actually after the umbrella movement, because a lot of the Hong Kongers know about the conflict between Hong Kongers and mainlanders. And actually people would just hope to separate itself from China. No matter having the movement of nationalism, just hope to recognize Hong Kong people as a nation. And also as separatism, some of the young people, they just hope to demand for independence and hope that Hong Kong could preserve its freedom and democracy. From their point of view, they may just think that under the PRC it is hard to maintain or achieve democracy and freedom. That's why they have tried to demand for independence. And actually for the whole of the trend, it also based or related to the criticism on pandemics and also the pro-establishment side. The Pan-Democrats, actually they have fight for democracy more than 30 years already. Actually Hong Kong people just demand for universal suffrage since 18th century. However, actually in the previous 30 years, it seems that the strategy is not really useful. What I mean is, those politicians may just expecting having the closed door meeting or the negotiation with the Beijing representative may get some of the chance for Hong Kong achieve universal suffrage. That's why actually with the rise of localism, a lot of young people will generate their dissatisfaction. For example, during the umbrella movement in 2014, people less than 30 years old, more than nearly 80% of them support civil disobedience and umbrella movement. Even actually after the end of umbrella movement, with the rise of localism, with the fishbowl revolution, the Mong Kok Incident in February, actually the activists or the young people try to beat the police, throw the bricks, or even burn the car and rubbish bin. Of course, the idea or the action have contradicted with the principle of non-violence, and actually it's not even a rally, demonstration, or civil disobedience. Even some of the media define it as a riot. But the fact is, after the end of the fishbowl revolution, done by referred to the survey conducted by some of the one of the university in Hong Kong, 12% of people may agree on this kind of action, and around 40% of people disagree but understand the reason behind for having this kind of action, and believe that the government need to bear the responsibility for it. And around 45% of the people may disagree and even condemn on this kind of action. What I mean is, facing the trend of radicalization, less people believe in non-violence resistance. People are tired of rally and demonstration. In Hong Kong, as Nathan have mentioned, since 2003, more than 500,000 of people joined into a strike for rally. However, we have just a lot of people may just realize that just having a rally that getting the permission from the police force would not generate enough pressure or bargaining power for us to demand universal suffrage. And actually, following the trend of the radicalization, actually it has the uprise of violent resistance. No matter the Mong Kok conflict, or actually for the one of the election results 3 months ago, how one of the localist representatives, Edward Leung, can get around 15% of votes in the election. Actually, have also implied or explained to the Hong Kong society, the localist is not only a minority group of people, they really have some of the power in the society, no matter you agree, support, or disagree with them. And actually, it's also the time for us to have more reflection. In 2015, after the end of umbrella movement and the veto of political reform package, we just realized that just following the political reform consultation with the 5-step procedure that defined by government, actually it's hard for Hong Kong people to achieve universal suffrage under this kind of arrangement. That's why actually if in the last century, no matter we have been kicked out of the list of the colony in the United Nations, we can't get any participation or send any representative from Hong Kong to involve in the Hong Kong future negotiation. Hong Kong people is really passive. Our future or destiny is just affected or dominated by Beijing and also British government. In this century, we just want to remind ourselves we won't make the same mistake. It also implied our worry about the end of joint declaration, which means that Hong Kong have implied the 50 years unchanged policy since 1997 to 2047, which means that after 2047, it will be the end of joint declaration and basic law. And it exists an uncertainty. We already think that one country, two system in this moment exists in name only. So what will be the situation of Hong Kong after the end of one country, two system? The worst case may be one country, one system. If in the last century, it's hard for Hong Kong to determine the future. In this century, what we hope is just push forward the referendum to let Hong Kongers, through one person, one vote, no matter forming the Constitution Reform Committee, or also through the referendum to decide the sovereignty of Hong Kong, implying one country, one system, one country, two system with self-governance or independence. At least we hope to promote or to push forward the demand or allowing people to choose their future. If we believe that the people being the master of the country, instead of allowing the Beijing government to determine the future of Hong Kong again in this century, we just believe that it's necessary for us to demand to let Hong Kong's to determine the future of ourselves. That's the reason that why we have found the new political party, Democracy, because we realized that it's not capable for us to push forward the demand of self-determination in the next 30 years from 2016 to 2047 with only a position of being a student activist. It's a long-term battle. That's why it's necessary for us to form a political party and set democratic self-determination to be our ultimate mission. What I mean is, we'll hope to uphold the mass center civic movement and link up and to build a linkage of the social movement and also the political party. And actually, we hope that through to promote or enhance the Hong Kong diversified identity to demand self-determination. Why Hong Kong is Hong Kong is because we still have maintained some of the core values, no matter freedom, freedom of speech, and also we can have rule of law and judicial independence. Even actually this kind of core value is facing this kind of core value approximation of judicial independence or rule of law is facing the erosion from the Beijing government. We face the white paper, decision made by the Standing Committee of PRC on 31 of August in 2014, and also the press freedom and other country after the release of Parliament paper, only the government official will step down. And Hong Kong, the Main Pound newspaper have set Parliament paper to be the A1 headline, and the chief editor need to step down because facing pressure from the pro-Beijing force. And actually, it's the situation that we face. What I mean is, from my point of view, I born in 1996, a year before handover, and Hong Kong have handover for 19 years, and I'm 19 years old. I just realized that actually the future problem of Hong Kong is not really a far away thing for me. In 2047, I'm 51 years old and I'm a middle-aged person in Hong Kong. And what I hope is just through our chance and through our own right to determine our future instead of allowing the pro-Beijing force to determine our future. It's not an easy thing for us from 2016 to 2047. To be more optimistic, we still believe that time is on our side. We hope to determine our future. However, it's a long-term battle for us. In the umbrella movement, we raise the political awareness for the new generation and also gain the international community concerned about the situation of Hong Kong. But we still can't get any significant change in the political system. We can't win in the last battle. But I still optimistic believe that in the future, we can still win in the war and to get back the own right for Hong Kongers. And this is the road towards democracy. Thank you.